All right. Good morning, party people. It's Monday during AI time, and you are on the Science ACT prep video. As always, my name is Bix, and I am here to help you through our lesson today. Our second week together, we are going to talk about basic testing practices. Last week, we talked kind of about how the ACT works in the science section, and we talked about passage types. Today, we're going to talk about the three main rules for the science section. We're going to do a little bit of review with those passage types. We're going to talk about question blocking, and you're going to have some practice time using Jamboard. The three main rules for the science section. Remember, we have the privilege of being the last one. Your brain is going to be real tired and you're going to be over it. You've been in that room for several hours at this point with one 10-minute break and limited snacks. It's not any way to live, but here we are. The first rule is read the questions first. The second rule is a direct offshoot of rule 1. Don't read the passage right away. That's how you waste your time. There are a lot of passages for science and not a lot of time to do them. 35 minutes for 40 questions. So you have to be really intentional with your time. Rule 3, skip to passage types that you know and love. We talked about passage types last week. You guys know that my favorite one is conflicting viewpoints. A lot of people really dislike that one, but that's why I hype it up so much. It needs a little bit of love. In order to follow these three general rules, I like to use the quit method, mostly because when I say just quit, people gasp, and I like that. But the quit method is questions first. Rule number 1, read them first. 2, underline important phrases. We'll talk about what that means for each of the passage types a little later on. Identify groups, that's that question blocking. And T, take it one question at a time. That's how you don't get overwhelmed. This is the last section. You've been through a lot of questions and you're kind of in a race to the finish. Before we get started today, I want to tell you how to access our activity. Option 1 is to click the link in the description and maybe even a pop-up if I'm tech savvy enough to put it somewhere around here. Hopefully you can just click on it. Option 2 is to click the link on the channel homepage, same as always. Click on the science folder. Today's date is August 30th. And then you will click on the activity for today, which is labeled, I believe, the activity for today is labeled 8:30 practice. If you click on the Google Doc, you can click the link in the Google Doc, and that will take you to our activity today. We are going to use Jamboard. It should ask you if you want to make a copy. Please click yes, that copy is yours so that you are the only person that writes on it. Go ahead and pause this video if you are trying to get that Jamboard open and you are not quite there yet. When you get to that Jamboard, you are going to see a screen that looks a little bit like this. Jamboard is really fun because you can use your finger or a stylus or whatever you have available to you to use this pen. I've pre-downloaded the images for you. Those are the passages that you saw last week as well. And once you click the pen over here on the left, you can draw whatever you want. Before we get started on that, go ahead and join me back on the screen. And I'm going to share with you first a couple tips about data representation. Data representation are those passages where there are a lot of graphs and tables and diagrams and other charts. My first big tip, like I just showed you on Jamboard, write on the test. Once they put your barcode on it, that test belongs to you. Writing on the test is going to help your brain sort out where you're supposed to answer and what you're supposed to answer. My second big tip is to block by graph or figure. So it'll say in figure 1 or in figure 2 or in table 1. There will be several questions that reference that 1 or 2 tables or figures. In this case, we've got 2 figures that the passage will refer to and that the questions will refer to. And my third one for this, if you get stuck, move on. You have very limited time to answer these questions. If your brain really cannot comprehend what's happening in that moment, move to the next passage type. There are 2 more that you have to deal with, and who knows, maybe the next one will be easier. Don't get discouraged. There are always more questions to answer. What I'm going to have you do is go ahead and go back to that Jamboard and see what you can do in terms of question blocking using these 3 tips. If you pause the video here and leave this window up on one side of your screen, you can keep these tips in mind while you work through on that Jamboard. When you come back, I'll show you how I blocked the data representation passage, which is on slide 1 of the Jamboard, and then we'll move on to the next passage type. All right, I'm sure you did a fabulous job on that question blocking. Let me show you how I did it. With my pen, I'm going to circle table 1 in question 1, table 1 in question 2, table 1 in question 5, and that is all that I'm going to circle for now. I'm going to put a box around figure 1. That's an ugly box, sorry guys. In question 3, a box around figure 1 in question 4, and a box around figure 1 in question 6. So I see that I have 3 questions that refer to table 1. That's right over here. I'm going to circle that. And then 3 questions that refer to figure 1. I'm going to put a box around that. That's going to help me keep track of what to use to answer which questions. At the end of this video, you'll have time to come back to this and answer those questions. But for right now, let's move on to our next question type. Our next question type or passage type is the conflicting viewpoints, my favorite. I love this one. My first tip out of 4 for conflicting viewpoints is write on the test. You're saying, I'm sick of you saying that. I'm sick of hearing you saying it. But I'm going to say it for the rest of the video. Please write on the test. It's yours. It'll help you, I promise. Please write on the test. The second is to block by student or researcher. Remember, we are kind of comparing opinions here. So there will be labeled student 1, student 2, student 3. Some of the questions will not ask about specific students. They'll ask you to compare. Do those questions last? Because more than likely, if you've already answered the questions about student 1 and student 2, when it comes to comparison questions about them, you've already read that. You don't have to go back. And lastly, for comparisons, look at the groupings in the answer. Sometimes they won't even ask you about student 2 at all, so don't go back and read that one if you're trying to find the answer. go ahead and go back to that Jamboard for me. If you need these tips, go ahead and pause the video. I'm going to set a timer to give you a little bit of time to block out the questions for the conflicting viewpoints passage on slide number 2 of our Jamboard. Okay, now that you've done that, I'll show you how I did it. Question, oh, my lights just turned off. Let's try that one again. Okay. All right, now that you're back, I will show you how I blocked out my questions for the second passage, the conflicting viewpoints type. Number 20 seems to be a comparison question, so I'm going to leave that one alone for now. Same thing for number 2 or number 21. But number 22 is a student 2. I'm going to put a star next to that and then put a star next to student 2, just so that my eyes can kind of see where I'm supposed to go back to. Number 23 is a comparison question. Number 24 is a comparison question. Number 25 is student 1. I'll make this a heart. Why not? That's an ugly heart. Sorry, guys. And number 26 is also a comparison question. Now, the reason that I selected this passage for our practice today is because it's really hard. In the last 3 years, this is probably the hardest conflicting viewpoints passage that I've seen. Now, if we practice on the hard ones, the easy ones are going to be even easier for you. So, because so many of these are comparison questions, we then have to look at the student groupings. If you look at number 20, student 1 is mentioned in 2 answers. Student 1 is also an option for number 21, 23, and student 1 is part of 3 answers for number 24, all of the F, G, and H. Student number 1 is an option in 1 of our answers for number 26. So I think what I'm going to do is put a little heart next to 20, 23, and 24 as well. I am going to do number 20 first. I'm going to put a number 1 right there, number 24 second, and then number 23 third out of that grouping. Number 26 and number 21 are kind of outliers. For those, at that point, we've read all of these student profiles 2 times. So you can do these in any order, but just based on the number that they come in, I'll probably do number 21, then number 26. Now you're saying, this is too complicated for me. Again, this is one of the hardest ones that I've seen, but the first thing we did is find questions about individual student perspectives. After that, we found the student that was most commonly found in the answers. And then we went through and kind of cleaned up the extra. That's why people think that these are so hard, because there are several steps involved to getting all of the right answers. If you don't love this passage type, I have a gift for you. Usually there's only one on the ACT out of all 5 passages. So you're in luck. We're going to go back to our PowerPoint here. If I can open it. There she is. And the last thing we're going to talk about is research summaries. Now, I have 4 tips again on the research summary. And the first one, your favorite, write on the test, write on it. My second tip is to block by experiment. If you remember last week, you know it's a research summary passage if you see experiment 1, experiment 2. Typically, they will ask questions about those experiments individually. Sometimes, again, there will be comparison questions, but there will also be individual data points that they'll ask you for. That's my 4th tip. I skipped over the 3rd one. But you'll see in our example today that it asks about individual Petri dishes. That way you can go back and you can look through, okay, here's Petri dish 1, here's Petri dish 7. It's only asking you about those, so you don't even have to look at the other ones. And lastly, I know we tell you not to read the passage, but research summary have cute little intros that I can show you here in a second that kind of explain what's happening. If you see this very first passage here, I'm going to put a little bracket around it. That passage explains what those graphs are about, what they're explaining in the data. If you are a person that needs a little bit of context, that could be a good thing for you to read. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to block out your questions on this last passage, and when we come back together, I will show you how I blocked them. Okay. Number 35 asks about Petri dish. That's what PD stands for. I saw that over here in the intro paragraph. PD8, Petri dish 8. If we go and look for Petri dish 8, it doesn't look like there's a photo of it, but you can see it as this square marker line in figure number 3. All you have to do is look at that one line, ignore the rest of the graphs for right now. The next question, number 36, mentions experiment 1. 37 is experiment 2. I'm going to put a box around that. Number 38 is talking about figure 1. Figure 1 is this over here. Ooh, number 39 is about experiment 2. Again, that's 2 questions. That should make your life a lot easier. And question 40 looks like it asks about experiment 1. So I'm going to underline that as well. Experiment 1 is right here, and experiment 2 is down here. Here's my square. What I'm going to do to kind of save my brain from having to look at all of this at one time. Oh, here's question number 34. I didn't even see that until right now. Look at me. Question number 34 asks about Petri dish number 5. Again, it doesn't look like there are any photos of it, but it is that dotted line in this graph right here. See, it's okay to make mistakes. I've been looking at this graph for the last 3 weeks and I totally forgot about it. So what I'm going to do is kind of draw a line around experiment 1. And then experiment 2 is everything at the bottom here plus this half of the other side. The questions start here. Now that's kind of a weird blocking and they do this on purpose. It's so that you have to keep looking back and forth. I've marked up a lot of this, but as long as you stay in control of, okay, this is an experiment, this is an individual data point, you should be good to go. This is where that T, take it one question at a time, really comes into play. Don't panic. You are doing an excellent job. What I want you to do now is to go back to each of these individual passage types. So 1, 2, and 3, and answer those questions for me. You have the rest of the hour to answer them. That should be just enough time to answer all of your questions and then check your answers on the document that I've posted in our folder labeled answer key. Just like last week, it should have the answer and then an explanation for why that is the correct answer. Thank you so much for joining me. I will hopefully see you next week and have a fabulous Monday, owls.